Have you ever felt so exhausted that all you wanted was to leave everything behind and just disappear for a while, even just for one day? Maybe you're sitting in your own home, listening to the rain tapping gently on your window. People around you are laughing, chatting, sharing happy photos on social media. But inside you, there's a storm, a quiet one, invisible. No one sees it. No one really understands. And the truth is, you don't even know who to talk to about it. Now imagine this. What would happen if someone just like that, someone carrying the weight of work, family, and survival, suddenly crossed paths with a Zen master on a rainy afternoon? It wasn't a magical or fated meeting, just two strangers caught in the same storm, taking shelter at the same roadside rest house. And yet, sometimes, it's the quiet, ordinary moments that stir the deepest part of our soul, especially when a simple question is asked so gentle, yet powerful enough to stop everything inside of you. Why aren't you happy? And what if just one honest conversation could completely change the way you see your life? This isn't fiction. It's not a metaphor. It's a real story, shared by someone who has spent a long time in silence, who has deeply understood human suffering, and who has slowly, patiently learned how to walk out of it. A long time ago, there was a young novice monk who had been ordained since childhood. Years later, when he was grown and appointed head monk, he began traveling with another young monk, journeying from village to village, city to city, carrying with them life lessons that no textbook could teach. On one such journey, a sudden downpour forced them to take shelter at a small rest house. Inside, the atmosphere was lively people sipping hot tea, enjoying the rare beauty of a rainy afternoon. But in one quiet corner sat a man, completely detached from the joy around him. His face was tired, his eyes heavy as if he was carrying the weight of an entire world on his shoulders. No one seemed to notice him, except the head monk. With slow, mindful steps and a kind voice, the monk walked over and asked, "Why are you sad in such a beautiful moment?" At first, the man hesitated, but something in the monk's peaceful presence made him open up. He shared that despite years of hard work, he could never find a better job. His income wasn't enough to support his wife and children. He felt like a failure as a father, powerless as a husband. Every day felt like being trapped in an invisible cage. The young monk beside the head monk was deeply moved. He nodded, feeling the weight of the man's pain so familiar, so human. But the head monk didn't respond with pity. Instead, he asked a question simple but piercing. "Do you think all your worrying has actually helped you fix anything?" The man was stunned for a second. "I guess not," he said quietly. "But is it even possible to live without worry?" The monk smiled kindly. "No one is free from worry. Not children, not the elderly, not even monks like us. The difference is when people let their worries consume them. Others learn to transform them." He went on, "You're looking at life only through the lens of what you don't have. You've forgotten to see what you do have. Like this job you call useless, it's still helping you feed your family, and yet you say it has no meaning. If your heart keeps chasing after what's not here yet, you'll never feel content." He compared worry to fire. The more you feed it through fear and overthinking, the bigger it grows. But if you shift that energy towards seeking solutions, the fire fades. The man sat quietly. Then he said something many of us have probably thought at least once in our lives. "I used to think, maybe if I were a monk, I wouldn't have anything to worry about." The head monk looked at him, eyes full of compassion. "You think monks don't have worries? We just don't let our worries run our lives. Instead of feeding fear, we water the seeds of peace. Instead of running from pain, we sit with it and we look directly into it." The man's eyes welled with tears. Not from sadness, but because for the first time he saw a way out. Not a way to escape, but a way to come home to himself. And that, my friends, is when the real story begins. The moment someone dares to face their own fear, to stop, turn inward, and realize that maybe, just maybe, happiness isn't waiting somewhere in the future. It's right here, in how we choose to see the present moment. So let's take the next step together. In the next part, we'll listen more deeply to the monk's gentle wisdom and discover why overcoming worry isn't a fantasy, it's an art of living. 1. No one is without worry. We just walk through it differently. There are days in life when you look around and feel like everyone else is doing better than you. They've got happy families, stable careers, that bright spark in their eyes. Meanwhile, waking up in the morning feels like going into battle. You still smile, still go to work, still show up as a father, a mother, a husband, a wife, but deep inside, there's this quiet emptiness that just lingers. Like life is moving on day by day, but without any real hope. The man in our story felt the same. He sat quietly in the corner of a roadside tea house where people were laughing, sipping warm tea, enjoying the rare calm of a rainy afternoon. Everyone seemed happy. Everyone seemed relaxed, except him, his eyes heavy, weighed down by the burdens of family and survival. In that moment, he felt like he was the only miserable soul in the entire room. Then a monk walked over. No rush, no preaching, just a calm presence. And one gentle question that stirred something deep inside the man. Do you think everyone here has no worries? Sometimes, all it takes is one simple question to shift the way we see everything. The man hesitated. Inside, his mind was a mess. He felt like a failure. No matter how hard he tried, life didn't seem to get any better. Low pay, rising costs, kids to raise, a wife, hoping for a better future, and he didn't even know where to start. He thought people who seemed happy just had fewer problems. But the monk smiled and said softly, "Everyone has worries. The difference lies in what they do with them. It's not that peaceful people have less on their shoulders. Many of them are facing silent struggles every single day, but they don't let those struggles consume their spirit. They act. They untangle one knot at a time. They don't sit and imagine the worse. They move, slowly, mindfully, toward what can be done." The Buddha once taught about the 2 arrows. The first arrow is life, the pain, the wounds, the loss. We can't avoid that. But the second arrow, that's the one we shoot into ourselves. When we respond with anger, fear, despair, or blame, that's what causes the deeper suffering. The man in this story was being pierced by that second arrow. He wasn't just hurting because of life's difficulties, he was suffering because of the way he looked at them. And then the monk continued, "When you think you're the only one struggling, you're mistaken. When you assume others have it easier, you're seeing the world through foggy glasses. No one is without worry. But those who are truly at peace, they walk through worry with awareness. They don't collapse under the weight of their own chaos." Those words landed deep. There was a stillness in the room. Maybe, for the first time in years, the man stopped looking outward and turned inward instead. It's a small story, but how many people are living just like that? Some live with everything they thought they wanted, yet still feel they're not enough. Others have secure jobs, but feel inadequate because they haven't caught up to others. Some are loved deeply, yet still feel lonely because a voice inside keeps whispering, "You should be more. You should be better." If we keep comparing, if we keep focusing on what's missing, we'll never feel like we have enough. Over the years of working with many adults in the Dharma community, there's one thing that comes up often. People quietly feel less than, like the world is moving forward, and they're stuck. But when we actually sit down and listen to each other, we start to see everyone is wrestling with something. The difference is, they don't let that struggle define their worth. A happy person isn't someone who no longer has problems. It's someone who no longer lets those problems control their life. Like a person rowing through a wide river, there are waves, storms, moments of getting lost, but they keep paddling, they keep steady. And they know just being on the boat, still moving forward, that's already something precious. If we look at the sky and sigh, why do the clouds always block the sun? We'll always feel stuck. But if we understand that the sun is still there, even behind the clouds, and that the rain helps us see the light more clearly when it returns, then we'll have the strength to keep going. No one lives a worry-free life, but if we can learn to see our worries as a companion, one that reminds us of what truly matters, then we won't have to fear them anymore. 2. Worry is fire. Whether it burns or dies out depends on how we feed it. There's something interesting about fire. If no one adds more wood, it dies out on its own. Fire, in itself, isn't a bad thing. It can keep us warm, light the way, cook the food we need to survive. But if we're not careful, it can burn down a house. And when fire burns, it doesn't care if that house belongs to a good person or a bad one, the rich or the poor. It just burns. That's the image the monk used to help the man in despair see something deeper. Worry is like fire, he said. If you feed it with fear and negative thoughts, it will burn up your whole soul. But if you meet it with wisdom and mindfulness, the fire will die down. And truth is, we've all felt the flames of anxiety at some point. Worried about aging parents. Worried about our kids and how they'll turn out in this uncertain world. Worried about a shaky job, a fragile body, a future that feels more fog than light. Sometimes the worry gets so heavy, you can barely breathe. But what the old monk was trying to say wasn't, don't worry, because that's not realistic. What he meant was, don't feed the fire with your fear. There was once a mother who shared through tears that every night, after putting her kids to bed, she'd sit alone in the kitchen, staring into the dark, feeling like she was slowly crumbling. No one saw. No one knew. She still cooked, still worked, still cared for her children. But deep inside, there was a fire burning with fears that her children might fail, that she might collapse before they grow up, that some unknown disaster was always waiting to strike. She once said, "I'm tired of being strong all the time. But if I don't hold it together, who will?" And the truth is, there are millions of people like her, just like the man in the story, carrying bundles of fear, tossing piece after piece into the fire inside them every single day. What the monk taught wasn't to suppress emotions, but to transform them, to realize that we do have a choice in how we face the fire. In Buddhism, there's a beautiful word, mindfulness. But mindfulness doesn't just mean sitting silently in the woods or breathing along with a meditation app. It means being fully present with what's happening without judgment, without running away, without labeling it bad or good. And when we sit with our worry long enough with real presence, we start to see it's not the enemy. It's just a signal, a bell ringing from within, saying something in us needs care. Like the little gas light that comes on in your car, no one gets mad at the light. You pull over and fill the tank. But when the light of worry blinks inside us saying, "I'm scared," or "I need rest," we often scold ourselves or bury it with more tasks. And just like that, the fire gets more fuel. The monk didn't preach. He simply helped the man see that his pain wasn't just from the worry itself, but from the way he looked at it. And when the man finally turned toward it, faced it with presence, the fire began to shrink. The monk once quoted a line from the Dhammapada, "The mind is the forerunner of all things. If you speak or act with a defiled mind, suffering follows you, like the wheel follows the ox that pulls the cart. If the mind is fire, then awareness is water. No one's saying you can't worry, but there's a huge difference between worrying in awareness and worrying in blindness. Worrying in awareness means you know you're worried, but you don't let it sweep you away. You still care for your family. You still make plans, but you do it with a clear mind and steady steps. An elder in the Dharma community once shared that she used to worry about everything: the weather, her kids, even traffic. But after practicing meditation, she said the one thing she learned was this: when worry comes, I smile. I look it in the eye and ask, what can I do today? You don't have to be a monk to do that. A father worried about his children. A mother worried about tomorrow's meal. A single person worried about their path ahead. Anyone can learn this. And slowly, the fire begins to go out. The real danger isn't worry. The real danger is not knowing that it's burning you. And once the flames die down, we finally begin to see the light that's been there all along. The sparkle in our child's eyes. The laughter in a warm cup of tea. A body that can still rise each morning. All of that is a gift. But we can only see it once. The smoke clears. And maybe that's when the man in the story started to understand. If he kept feeding the fire with fear and blame, he'd never escape that deep despair. But if he could step back, breathe with it, and start tending to it with compassion and wisdom, a new path would appear. Not a path without challenges, but a path where he would no longer burn in silence. And that's what leads us forward. Because ahead, the monk will begin to show him and all of us how to transform worry into a source of strength, not with fancy words, but through the simple actions of everyday life. Let's continue in the next part. 3. What hurts us most isn't life itself, it's how we see life. Sometimes, people don't suffer because of what's actually happening. They suffer because of how they interpret what's happening. Think of someone with a stable job, a warm home, enough food on the table, and yet, inside, they still feel like something's missing. Missing a better opportunity, missing recognition, missing some image of success that the world says they should have by now. And that lingering feeling of not enough. Day after day, it quietly eats away at the soul, until one day, it becomes real suffering. That was the case for the man in this story too. He had a family. He had a modest job enough to support his wife and kids. He had a place to return to after a long day of work. But in his eyes, there wasn't even a flicker of gratitude. All he could see were the things he didn't have. The gaps, the missing pieces. And that became the reason his world felt so dark. The monk sat beside him quietly. He didn't interrupt, didn't rush to offer advice. He just let the man speak. And when the man had finally poured out his pain, the monk said gently, "You know, sometimes the greatest suffering doesn't come from your situation, but from how you see your situation." The man looked up, confused. It wasn't a criticism. It wasn't denying his pain. But for the first time, someone helped him stop and actually look inward. In Buddhism, there's a powerful image. When a dog is struck by a rock, it chases the rock. But when a lion is struck, it turns and looks at who threw it. Pain, hardship, circumstances, they're the rocks. We suffer because they hit us. That's real. But whether we stay trapped in suffering depends on where we focus our gaze. The man didn't see that he still had the strength to work, that he could still provide, that his hands were still capable. All he could see was what he hadn't achieved. He stared at the unfinished parts of his life and convinced himself his whole life was a failure. And he's not alone. A woman may have a caring husband and good children, yet still feels lonely because her husband isn't as romantic as someone else's. A man may have a steady job, but feels small because his friends earn more. What makes us suffer isn't always the reality. It's the expectation. And most expectations, we create them ourselves. There was once a middle-aged Buddhist woman who came to the temple and said, "I don't know why, but no matter how much I have, I always feel like it's not enough. I'm not poor, but I feel anxious, like I have nothing at all." The monk smiled and said, "You're not lacking anything. You just haven't learned how to truly see what you already have." It sounds simple, but it's a key that could unlock a lifetime of pain. You see, the human mind has a tendency to remember what's missing and forget what's present. A small debt can keep someone up at night, while a roof over their head goes unnoticed. One harsh comment can echo in the mind for days, while 1,000 acts of love and care fade into the background. The Buddha taught a practice called mindful reflection on what we already have. He encouraged us, each day, take a moment and ask, "Can I still breathe today? Can I still see the light? Can I still walk? Is there someone I love? Is there something I feel grateful for?" And when the mind is trained to see what's full in the cup, suffering naturally begins to quiet down. The man in our story had never been shown this. His mind was trained to see only the emptiness, and so he saw himself as poor, as powerless, as a failure. The monk didn't lecture him. He didn't offer lofty teachings. He just sat there, like a mirror, letting the man see himself clearly for the first time. And sometimes, that's the most precious thing one human being can offer another. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha said, "When a person knows contentment, even sleeping on bare ground feels light. When a person lacks contentment, even a palace feels burdensome." The feeling of lack doesn't come from how much you have. It comes from a mind that hasn't yet been trained. So, the first step out of suffering isn't to change your life. It's to change how you see your life. No one denies that life is hard. But if, every day, we practice noticing one good thing, even something small, the heart begins to steady, like a traveler in the rain who sees just one sunbeam breaking through the clouds. That tiny light is enough to keep walking. And when the man in the story finally looked again, he saw that he was still here, still had time, still had the power to change, and most importantly, still had life in him. That moment, when someone shifts from seeing what's missing to what's present, is when a whole new path begins. Not a path of complaint or despair, but a path of understanding and action. And that's where the monk began to guide him deeper, not just to feel gratitude, but to live with a grateful heart, and to meet whatever comes next with mindfulness and clarity. We'll continue that journey together in the next part. 4. When you keep thinking you're not enough, you unknowingly give up the peace you already have. Sometimes, what hurts a person the most isn't what they lack. It's the quiet belief inside them that they're never enough. They might still have a job. They might still have a family, a roof over their head, food on the table, but their mind isn't there. Their heart is constantly chasing a better version of life. A life that's more perfect, more complete, more successful than someone else's. And because they keep comparing, keep wishing for what hasn't arrived yet, they stop seeing the value in what they already hold. The elder monk looked at the man sitting in front of him, his eyes heavy with the sadness of feeling like a failure. After listening quietly, the monk gently said, "When you keep thinking life is unfair, that you don't have enough, it's that very thought that steals away the peace you already have. Be grateful, even for the little things, because those are what hold your life up every single day." The man froze, not because he hadn't heard about gratitude before, but maybe this was the first time someone showed him that peace doesn't come from having more. It comes from seeing enough in what's already here. We often think peace is something big. It'll come when we retire, when we have more money, when the kids grow up and succeed, when everything is finally in place. But no, peace doesn't wait for someday. It can only exist right here, right now. In the Buddhist teachings, there's a beautiful word, knowing what is enough, the joy of enough. It doesn't mean giving up or settling. It means appreciating what we already have while still walking forward with awareness. A single mother in New Jersey once shared her story. There were days when all she could afford was a small carton of milk and a loaf of bread, just enough for her and her daughter to share. At first, it broke her heart. She felt ashamed, felt like a failure. But one day, as she watched her little girl eating happily, smiling without a care, she realized life was still happening, and she was still nurturing a life day by day. From that moment, she started writing down 3 things she was grateful for every night before bed. Some days it was simple. Today my daughter wasn't sick. Today it didn't rain. Today someone called to check in on me. Slowly, her heart softened. She didn't get richer, but she felt lighter. That story isn't uncommon. In Buddhist communities across America, there are people who don't have much, but they live like small lanterns, quietly radiating peace. Because they've learned this truth. If your heart always chases what's missing, you'll always feel empty no matter how much you have. And when someone believes they're not enough, they'll always see others as having more. They'll feel irritated when others are happy, frustrated when someone else succeeds, maybe even bitter at life for being unfair. But it's that mindset, not the actual situation, that robs them of their inner calm. The monk didn't preach or give a lecture. He just gently invited the man to look again. What are you actually living on each day? Maybe it's that morning loaf of bread. Maybe it's a hard job, but one that still pays. Maybe it's a kind child, a roof that doesn't leak when it rains. Those little things, when seen through the eyes of gratitude, can become the solid foundation of true happiness. The Buddha once said in the Dhammapada, "Contentment is the greatest wealth. One who knows enough finds joy, even in little. But one who always craves more will never be at ease, even in abundance." Yes, some situations in life are genuinely tough. But the Buddha didn't teach us to run from reality. He taught us to look more deeply, to realize that it's not circumstances that shape our peace. It's the state of our heart when we face them. Someone might come home from a long, rainy, traffic-filled day, tired and hungry. Dinner's simple, nothing special. But if they walk in and see their child waiting, feel the warm glow of a small light, hear soft music playing from the next room, and they smile, suddenly, the storm outside doesn't matter anymore. Gratitude doesn't wait for life to be perfect. It starts now, in the little things that help us survive the day. A cup of water, a restful night's sleep, a kind word, a pain-free day, a friend who still shows up. And if, every morning, we choose to focus on just one small good thing, life will begin to feel different. Not because life itself has changed, but because our eyes have. Just like the man in the story, if he can stop saying, "I don't have enough," and start seeing what he already has, he'll begin living a different life, even if nothing else around him changes. That shift from craving to appreciation, from blame to gratitude, is the turning point in transforming suffering. When someone starts living with a grateful heart, even just a little, every day, their mind becomes steady like a tree rooted deep in the earth. The winds may blow, the rains may come, but they won't be so easily swept away anymore. And that's when the monk asks the next question, a question anyone who's suffered from constant worry needs to hear. "Tell me, all this worrying you've done, Has it ever truly solved anything? It sounds like a simple question, but it's actually the beginning of something powerful. Not a conversation with someone else, but a conversation with your own heart. And we'll step into that dialogue together. 5. Running away doesn't end the pain, it just takes it with you. Sometimes, you don't need a storm to feel like your whole life is falling apart. Just a light drizzle, a crowded room where you still feel alone. That's enough for the sense of failure to come crashing in like a flood. And in moments like that, thoughts of giving up, disappearing for a while, or starting over somewhere far away quietly slip into your mind. That's exactly where the man in the story had arrived. He didn't cry. He didn't complain. He didn't get angry. But in his tired eyes, you could see a weariness that had lasted too long. It was the feeling of, I've tried everything, but it's still not enough. The guilt of not being able to give his family a better life. And the quiet whisper, maybe I should just go. Be alone. No more pressure. No more responsibility. He didn't say it out loud, but the elder monk saw it in him. And instead of calling him weak, the monk just smiled gently and said, running away doesn't make the pain go away. It just makes the pain follow you quietly and deeper. The room seemed to go still for a moment, because the truth is, some pain isn't about where you are. It's about what you're carrying inside. You can leave a house, a job, a city, but if your heart is still full of disappointment, anger, fear, shame, or resentment, then no matter how far you run, that pain will follow, like a shadow beneath the feet of a traveler. There's a story in the Buddha's teachings. One day, a man came to the Buddha and said, Master, I'm suffering so much in this life. I want to leave it all behind. Go far away. Find a place with no more worries. The Buddha was quiet for a moment, then asked, Where do you want to go? The man replied, Anywhere as long as there's no suffering. And the Buddha looked into his eyes and said, If you don't understand that the root of your suffering is in your own mind, then wherever you go, the suffering will go too. That truth hits hard, because in our imagination, a fresh start in a new place feels like healing. But the reality is, if we don't face what's breaking us inside, we'll keep reliving the same patterns over and over, just with new faces, new surroundings. The man in the story thought that leaving would make life easier, but the monk gently showed him the pain wasn't coming from his wife or his job. It came from the way he viewed himself, from the guilt of not doing enough, from feeling like he wasn't good enough, or successful enough, or worthy enough. And if he didn't make peace with himself, then even in a different life, he'd still feel like a failure. Another man once shared during a counseling session, I used to think about leaving my family, my job, moving somewhere no one knew me to start over. But now I'm scared, because I'm the one person I can't leave behind. That sentence was raw and brave. Because the biggest kind of running isn't always about leaving a place. Sometimes it's about avoiding the pain inside us. The Buddha once said, no one can escape suffering by avoiding it. Only by facing it, understanding it, and transforming it does it truly end. And maybe someone might say, but I'm too tired. I don't have the strength to fight anymore. But Buddhism never asks us to fight. It's not about forcing ourselves to be strong. It's the path of letting go of the roots of our suffering, not letting go of ourselves. The elder monk didn't ask the man to be tough. He didn't tell him to push through. He simply invited him to sit, to stay, to stop running. He helped him see that behind the thought of wanting to disappear was actually a heart in pain, a heart that needed care, not judgment, not rejection. There was a man once during a winter retreat in Oregon. He stood up in the middle of a meditation session and broke into tears. He said, "I used to think meditation was about finding peace. But today, I realized it's about having the courage to sit with the parts of myself I used to run away from. No one is strong all the time. But if we can just learn to stop turning away from ourselves, even for a moment, that in itself is already healing." The man in the story began to understand this. He didn't say much more, but his eyes softened. He didn't need to solve everything. He didn't need to suddenly become the perfect man. He just needed to know, I don't have to run anymore. And that was a beginning, because only when we pause and admit, I'm hurting, I'm tired, I'm lost, only then does the door begin to open. Not to an escape, but to a path that goes inward. A path that begins not with changing our life, but with changing our heart. 6. Everyone has worries. What matters is how we face them. People often think that only those living in the world, the lay people, have worries. Things like food, money, housing, children, aging, and illness. And monks, those wearing the golden robes, they must have left all that behind, right? Living a pure, detached life with no struggles, no attachments, no restless nights. But honestly, that's just an image we like to paint from the outside. The young novice in this story used to believe the same thing. When he listened to the man pouring out his pain, the helplessness of not being able to provide a better life for his wife and kids, the novice felt a deep sympathy. And somewhere in his heart, he thought, that's true. Life for lay people is so hard, so many responsibilities. Maybe living as a monk like me is actually much easier. But the elder monk walking beside him simply smiled. Not a smile of argument, not dismissing the novice's feelings. Just a soft, compassionate smile. The kind that comes from someone who has walked through those same worries and now understands them deeply enough not to fear them. Then the elder spoke gently. Do you think monks don't have worries? There's no one in this world without worries. The difference is how we choose to meet them. That sentence, light as a breeze, made the young novice stop in his tracks, not just in his step, but in his heart. Because ever since becoming a monk, he'd thought he had stepped away from the world of anxiety. Living in the temple, there's no need to earn money, no gossip to dodge, no romantic drama or competition to fight. Just days of chanting, meditating, sweeping leaves a life that seems peaceful and simple. But then there were those nights where he couldn't sleep. And during meditation, his thoughts would drift. Am I on the right path? Am I doing enough? How are my family members doing out there? Do they miss me? Are they upset with me? And in those moments, he felt it. A quiet, yet very real worry. So when the elder said, we have worries too, but we don't let them control us, the novice understood deeply. The Buddha never said monastic life was a way to escape suffering. In fact, he made it very clear. Suffering is the first truth. Everyone must face it, no matter who you are or how you live. Monks don't run from worry. Monks learn how to transform it. And that transformation doesn't come from pretending everything's okay or from forcing yourself to be strong. It comes from wisdom and mindfulness. In many retreats, you'll find single parents, retirees, people grieving losses, but you'll also see monks and nuns, people who still carry very human worries. They worry about guiding their students well. They worry when loved ones fall ill and they can't be there. They worry when a young disciple loses their way and they don't know how to reach them. The difference is, they don't let the worry become the master of their heart. They live with it, accept it, observe it, but they are not ruled by it. A senior monk in San Jose once shared after a retreat, "I've had many sleepless nights. Not because I was hungry, but because my heart ached watching people in the temple argue and fight. I felt powerless. I felt like I had failed. But instead of scolding anyone, instead of leaving, I sat alone, swept the grounds, watered the trees, and walked meditation one step at a time, until that worry quietly softened into my breath." Transforming worry doesn't happen overnight. It's an art of living. The deeper one lives, the more they see. Worry doesn't just vanish, but it can be held, transformed, and turned into fuel for understanding. The Buddha said in the Samyutta Nikaya, "Like a boatman who knows his craft, he will guide the boat through waves and wind. But without skill, the boat may sink even when the water is still." The elder monk didn't hide the truth from the novice, that even in monastic life, there will be times when the heart feels heavy. There will be tests. But in those very trials, a true practitioner learns to listen inwardly, build inner strength, and from that grows spiritually. The layman has worries about his family, his responsibilities. The monk has worries about upholding the Dharma, transforming the self, guiding others. Worry is not something to eliminate. It's something to look at directly, so we can learn how to walk through it without losing ourselves. And that day, the young novice realized something precious. He was never an outsider to human experience. He was part of this life just like everyone else. And so, yes, he too had worries. But thanks to his teacher, the path, and the practice of mindfulness, he knew now that he didn't have to fear his worries anymore. And from that new understanding, he looked at the man sitting silently with his cup of cold tea, with different eyes. Not with pity, but with empathy. Not seeing layperson or monk, but seeing simply another human being on the path. Learning how to stay soft in a world that often feels too heavy to hold. 7. Suffering is a part of happiness and a gateway to inner peace. There are some words that feel so gentle, but when we hear them at just the right moment, it's like our whole life suddenly realigns itself. The elder monk sat beside the man in a quiet little guest house on a soft, rainy afternoon. After a long conversation about failure, worry, and the urge to give up, he finally spoke slowly and fully, not many words, but each one felt grounded and true. Life itself is a lesson. Without suffering, you won't understand the value of happiness. Look at what you already have, instead of chasing what hasn't come yet. That is the path to peace. Then there was silence. A deep, still pause. That sentence didn't promise anything magical about the future. It didn't paint a picture of some perfect world where worries vanish. Instead, it invited the man to return to the present moment, to himself, to something simple yet lasting. The clarity of seeing life as it is, right now. If you've ever sat at the bedside of a loved one in their final days, you'll understand this deeply. When death draws near, no one thinks about their big house, their degrees, their reputation. In that moment, all we want is one more breath, one familiar voice calling our name, one hand holding ours. And yet, most people only realize this too late. In Buddhism, there's a word, dukkha. It's often translated as suffering, but it's more than that. It's the fundamental unsatisfactoriness of life, the impermanence, the constant change, the never quite enoughness of it all. Everything shifts, and because we want things to stay the same, we suffer. But the elder monk didn't say, "Don't feel sad." He didn't say, "Cheer up, it'll all be okay." number. He simply reminded the man, suffering is part of the lesson. Without suffering, we don't grow. Without getting lost, we'd never know what it means to find our way. Without empty days, we wouldn't appreciate even one ordinary, peaceful moment. And perhaps most importantly, when we accept that suffering is part of life, we stop demanding that life be perfect. And when we stop demanding that, we finally start to live. I remember a man once came to a retreat and shared this. He had tried everything to escape the sadness after his divorce. Drinking, burying himself in work, new relationships, long trips. But nothing helped. Nothing made the ache go away. Until one day, he sat still, for the first time, and faced that sorrow head on. And he said, "It didn't disappear, but I stopped running from it. And from that moment, it felt like I was finally starting to live again." The elder monk continued, "Look at what you already have. Not because life doesn't have more good things to offer, but because if we don't learn to appreciate what we already have, we won't recognize the better things when they do come. The human mind is always running ahead. When I get that new job, I'll be happy. When my kid grows up, I'll finally have peace. When I pay off my debt, then I can breathe." But that kind of mind never rests. It jumps from one milestone to another and forgets that life isn't about reaching a destination. Life is this moment, fully present, fully alive. A wise older Buddhist once told me, "I used to think happiness meant living in a place where no one could ever hurt me. But now I know happiness is learning how not to let that hurt control my heart anymore." The elder monk didn't talk about liberation or use philosophical terms like nirvana. He just called it peace. A peace that's quiet, unflashy, but deep enough to settle the soul. The man didn't nod or cry or break down like a movie scene. He just sat there, quietly. Maybe, for the first time in years, he wasn't trying to fix anything. He was just being with himself. He looked out the window. The rain was still falling. But this time, he didn't see the rain as an obstacle to his journey. He saw it as a part of that day. And his heart felt just a little lighter. Maybe nothing had changed yet, but the very act of not running, of not blaming, of not complaining, that was already the beginning of something new. That new path, it wasn't paved with roses, but it was a road inward toward a steadiness of spirit, where every step becomes a step home, to the truth of life itself. 8. Worry doesn't make life better, it just makes you absent from your own life. Have you ever sat in a quiet room, no noise, no phone calls, no emails, and yet your mind was a complete mess? Outside, nothing urgent was happening, but inside, your thoughts were running wild. What if the contract doesn't go through tomorrow? What if my child makes the wrong choice? What if my loved one's illness gets worse? What if I can't pay the bills this month? And so, even though you're sitting still, doing absolutely nothing, you're exhausted because your mind is busy worrying. The man in our story felt exactly like that. When the elder monk gently asked him, "Has all that worrying helped you solve anything?" he didn't answer. Not because he didn't know, but because he knew the answer too well. For years, he'd lived in a constant state of bracing for the worst. Always on edge, always alert, always feeling like he hadn't done enough. But for all that worry, did his life actually get better? He'd imagined every worst-case scenario. But did that ever bring peace? number. In fact, what he lost the most wasn't money. It was time. Time to live. Time to breathe. Time to notice his child growing up, one day at a time. Time to watch the sunrise from his porch. Time to listen to a song without multitasking. Time to simply feel that he was alive. In Buddhism, there's a word, anicca, impermanence. It means nothing lasts forever. Not the sadness, not even life itself. So, the most precious thing we have isn't our wealth or our titles. It's the time we spend truly living in the present. But that's hard, isn't it? Because most of us are living as if this is the rehearsal, as if the real show starts later. We postpone heartfelt conversations because we're too busy. We delay family vacations because the timing isn't right. We skip the hugs, the glances, the thank yous, thinking there'll be other chances. But what's left is just time that's passed. Time that never comes back. The monk looked at the man and said softly, "The time you spend worrying is time you lose forever. You can't get it back. You can't redo it. No one can return it to you." I remember a woman who once came to a retreat and shared, "I thought I was being a responsible mom, always planning ahead, always preparing for anything. But when my daughter moved away for college, I realized all those years we lived under the same roof, I was so busy worrying for her that I wasn't really with her. I remember rushing through dinner to finish extra work. I remember snapping at her for sleeping in. I was there, but not really present." That story hit hard because it's so real. And honestly, it's also really sad. Worry doesn't make us live better. It just makes us live less. We eat, but don't taste. We hear, but don't really listen. We sit in the same room with someone, but our minds are lost in some future that hasn't even happened and might never happen. Worry keeps us trapped in an imaginary world, a place full of what ifs and worst-case scenarios. Meanwhile, life is happening right here, right now. The Buddha once taught, "No one steps into the same river twice, for the river is always changing, and so is the person stepping in. Every moment is new, and if we're not there for it, it slips by like a dream we don't remember." The monk didn't shame the man for worrying. He simply helped him see, if worry is how you've been living, then how much of your life have you actually lived? Not how many years you've been alive, but how many moments you've truly been awake. The man sat in silence. Not despair, not depression, but something more sacred, a deep awareness. He realized he'd spent so many years running toward something he couldn't even name, and in all that running, he'd left his life behind. There was a man in Chicago who once shared in a Dharma talk, "I used to live like a machine. Leave the house early, come back, exhausted. Every time my wife or son spoke to me, I snapped, because my mind was full of deadlines, clients, money. And now, I can't even remember what it felt like when my son started first grade. It's all a blur, because I wasn't really there." And maybe we've all been there. So when the monk said, "The more you worry, the further you drift from your life," it wasn't a warning. It was a wake-up call, a reminder to come back, not to some faraway place, but to this moment, the breath you're taking right now, the way your eyes open each morning, the birds singing outside your window, whether you notice or not, the warm tea in your hands, if you're willing to sit down and actually taste it. When the monk said, "Worry steals time you can never get back," he wasn't trying to make the man feel guilty. He simply wanted him to see. Life is happening. Right now. Minute by minute. And you're missing it minute by minute. You don't need to do anything grand. Just stop. Breathe. Look. Feel. Because if you don't live in the present, you'll end up living only in memories or in make-believe futures. And maybe in that exact moment, the man finally understood why his heart always felt so empty. No matter how hard he worked, it wasn't because he hadn't done enough. It was because he had never really been there for his own life. 9. A simple question that opens the door to a big transformation. Sometimes, a question can be so simple and yet shake something deep inside us. Not because it's profound, not because it's poetic, but maybe, just maybe, because no one's asked us that in a long, long time. Or maybe we've forgotten how to ask it ourselves. Outside, the rain was falling gently. Soft drops tapping on the tiled roof, on the leaves, on the damp earth. Inside the humble little retreat house, people were chatting and smiling, holding warm cups of tea in their hands, finding a bit of comfort on a chilly, rainy afternoon. No one seemed worried. No one sighed or stared out the window. The air felt calm, as if the rain had washed away all the heaviness of the day. But in one quiet corner, there was a man sitting alone. His tea had gone cold. He didn't speak, didn't look at anyone, just sat there, as if wrapped in a quiet fog, his eyes distant, his heart heavy. Everyone else was present, but he wasn't. He was there, but his mind had gone elsewhere. Maybe to a job that wasn't working out. Maybe to his children and their struggles. Maybe to memories of things that never turned out the way he'd hoped. And then the elder monk walked over, softly, like a wisp of incense smoke. No drama. No pressure. No trying to make the man open up. He simply sat beside him, like an old friend, like a father who'd been through the storm himself. And after a long enough pause, so the man wouldn't feel invaded, the monk asked just one quiet question. Why aren't you happy? Just one question. But it became the beginning of everything. In real life, people rarely ask us things like that. They ask, how's work? Are the kids doing well in school? You staying healthy this season? Or they say, wow, you've been busy lately. What's your plan for the future? All about what we do, but rarely about how we feel. Why aren't you happy? It's not a question that needs an instant answer. It's a question that lingers, that sinks in, that touches the part of us we often avoid. Because sometimes we smile, not because we're happy, but because we're hiding something we haven't said. We still go to work. We still come home on time. Still cook meals. Still pay bills. But inside, something is dimming. That one question asked gently, without judgment, was like a small light placed in the corner of the man's darkness. He didn't answer right away, but his eyes changed, like a faint light cutting through a thick fog. There's something beautiful and strange about the human heart. We only begin to admit our pain when someone truly sees us. When our suffering feels invisible, it grows heavy. But when it's seen, it begins to soften. That moment, the man began to open up, not through grand speeches, but through sighs, through a few nods, through quiet, hesitant murmurs of, yeah. And little by little, he spoke about work, about family, about feeling stuck, about the dreams he used to have, and what he couldn't hold on to. And that right there was when transformation began. Not because he found all the answers, but because he finally saw that there was a part of him just waiting to be heard, to be seen, to be touched. The elder monk didn't tell him to think positive, didn't offer a magic mantra to fix it all. He simply was there, with a heart that had once carried the same pain, a heart that knew. What we need most in that moment is a real question, asked from a place of care. Why aren't you happy? Maybe that's a question we should ask ourselves too. On the days when our hearts feel heavy, and we're not quite sure why, not to find fault, but to reconnect, to pause, to stop pretending we're okay, to sit quietly and say, "It's okay. I'm tired. I'm sad. I have the right to feel this way. And I'm here, with this sadness, just being with it." Sometimes that's enough to begin stepping out of the dark. In the scriptures, the Buddha once asked a disciple, if someone is struck by an arrow, what should they do first? The disciple replied, "Take the arrow out." The Buddha nodded. Yes, not analyze who shot it, or why, or where it came from. First recognize you're wounded, and tend to the wound. Pain, sorrow, they're just like that arrow. If we don't face them, we end up running. And the more we run, the deeper they go. But with the right question, at the right moment, and enough loving presence to hold the space, healing begins. Why aren't you happy? It didn't just open a conversation between two people. It opened a meeting far more sacred. A meeting between a man and the truth within himself. And right then, in what seemed like such an ordinary moment, with tea, with laughter, with gentle rain, one man quietly began his journey back to life. 10. You don't have to go find peace, you just need to see it in the life you already have. After all the quiet sharing, the hesitant pauses, the eyes that once avoided now slowly softening, the man began to feel a crack of light opening up inside. Not because he solved all his problems. His job was still there. His family still needed his care. Money was still tight. But something had shifted. And that shift didn't come from the outside. It came from someone sitting beside him. Not promising miracles. Not pushing him to change his life. Just gently offering a different way of looking at things. The elder monk didn't tell him to quit his job, change careers, or start over. He didn't say, "Your life will be better if you walk another path." He simply said, in a calm, warm voice, "You can begin to find peace right here, in the life you're already living." And in that moment, a door opened. In today's world, we're often trapped in this belief. I'll only be happy when my life on the outside is finally settled. When I land a better job. When I make more money. When the kids are grown. When I find someone who truly understands me. Someday. But that someday keeps drifting further away. Like a road with no end. And while we're chasing after what hasn't come yet, we lose touch with what's here now. The only place where peace ever truly lives. The man in this story was the same. He thought, once I earn more, once the kids are independent, once life is less messy, then I can finally breathe. But year after year, life only added more weight. And the peace he'd been waiting for, it never arrived. Until he heard something simple. It's not your situation that makes you suffer. It's the way you're looking at it. The elder monk didn't deny the hardships. He didn't ask the man to fake a smile. He simply helped him see this truth. If you keep trading away your inner peace for something you might have one day, you may never actually live your life at all. A woman once came to the temple, visibly exhausted. She said she'd spent years trying to keep up with everyone else. A bigger house, a better car, a prestigious school for her kids. But the more she tried, the emptier she felt inside. when the monk gently asked her, "Have you ever felt that what you have is enough?" She broke down in tears. No one had ever asked her that before, and she realized, through all her striving, she'd never allowed herself to feel peace. Her teacher didn't tell her to sell the house or give up the car. He just said, "You don't need to give up anything. But starting today, each day, take a moment to pause and recognize, I'm alive, and that is enough." The man in our story was learning the same lesson. He didn't have to leave, didn't have to wait for a life-changing moment. He just had to stop treating the present as a temporary phase before real life began. Because if we're always waiting, life will pass us by, one quiet, wasted day at a time. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha said, "No one steps into the same river twice. The water has changed, and so has the person. Life is a flowing river. Each moment is unique. If we miss it, we miss ourselves." The elder monk showed the man, that boring job, it's how he feeds his family. That cramped house, it's where his children sleep safely at night. That nagging wife, she's the one sharing life's weight with him. None of it is perfect, but all of it is real, and when seen clearly, deeply precious. A Dharma teacher once said at a talk in California, "You don't need to run off to find peace. Peace isn't waiting at the end of the road. It's in each step. And if your steps aren't peaceful, you'll still feel tired, even when you arrive." The elder monk didn't promise that life would get easier. He simply helped the man understand. You don't need to wait to feel at peace. You just need to open your eyes to what's already here and stop thinking it's not enough. Peace isn't about salary. It's not about fame. It's about awareness, about no longer trading your soul for a future that may never come. And that was how the man began to feel lighter. Not because he had more, but because he finally let go of that constant feeling of not enough. This story didn't end with applause or some cinematic happy ending. It ended with something more real, a quiet reminder that any of us, at any point, can begin to come home to ourselves. And as the rain outside slowly stopped, something inside the man began to settle too. Not because his troubles disappeared, but because he was no longer the same. He no longer saw himself as a victim of life, no longer waited for a better future to give him permission to rest. He understood now. What he needed wasn't a different life, but a different way of seeing the one he already had. The elder monk didn't give him a fix. He didn't perform a miracle. He just planted a seed of mindfulness. And from that, the transformation quietly began. Dear friends, we all have moments when we feel tired, lost, or want to run away from it all. But often, what we truly need isn't somewhere out there. It's right here in how we show up for each moment and for ourselves. If this story touched something in your heart, if it brought you a bit of calm, a quiet reminder, or simply made you feel seen, please leave a comment below and share what stayed with you most. And if you'd like to keep walking this path of awakening, growing, and understanding yourself more deeply through the wisdom of the Buddha, please hit that subscribe button for Buddhism Seeds, like the video, and share it with someone who might need a little light today. Thank you for being here. May you continue walking with mindfulness. Each breath, each step, a gentle return to yourself.